Leonardo's name constantly comes to mind for countless people due to the widespread recognition of perhaps the most famous painting of all, the renowned The Last Supper. Who does not know Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper, and knowing it, does not admire the powerful idea expressed particularly in this painting? We see the figure of Christ in the center, with 12 disciples on either side of him. We see these 12 disciples with deeply expressive movements and postures. We see gestures and poses of each of the 12 figures so individualized that we might get the impression that all forms of expression of the human soul and character are embodied in them. Every way the soul might relate, according to its temperament and character, to what the painting expresses is embodied in them. Jesus Christ utters the words, "One of you will betray me." We see what happens in each of these 12 souls, so closely connected to the speaker and so reverently looking at him after these words are spoken. There were depictions of the Last Supper dating back to earlier times. In my previous video, you can see how other artists interpreted this subject. Here we will only say that Leonardo introduced what we might call a dramatic element into his The Last Supper, for it is a strikingly dramatic moment that is presented to us in his depiction. Earlier depictions seem peaceful, expressing, so to speak, only the fact of being together. Leonardo's The Last Supper seems to be the first to present, with full dramatic force, the expression of very significant psychic states. Leonardo thought a lot about how to show human emotions in painting. One of the key phrases in his treatise is, "The artist has two goals, the person and the manifestations of his soul. The first is simple, the second is difficult, because he must reveal it through movement." It was through movement and gesture that he tried to express feelings. This is an exclusively Italian trait, as the great German poet Goethe wrote in his essay on the Last Supper. He was especially interested in the differences in the structure of human faces, in which both a person's character and the momentary passion that seized him are revealed, and this is the main thing that we linger on especially long when we look at the Last Supper. The means the artist uses to shake the saints, calmly dining, is the words of the teacher, "One of you will betray me." The words are spoken, confusion engulfs all those gathered, and he bows his head and lowers his gaze. The entire pose of the Savior, the movements of his hands and fingers, all echo that heavenly humility and fateful words. Yes, it is so. One of you will betray me. What is the technique Leonardo used more than all others to breathe life into his painting? This technique is the movement of hands, and only an Italian could discover it. In people of his nation, the whole body is spiritualized. All limbs take part in any expression of feeling, passion, even thought. Leonardo, who observed all characteristic features with great attention, must have particularly focused his inquisitive gaze on such a national trait. In this regard, his painting is unique, and no matter how much we look at it, it is never enough. The faces and all movements of his heroes are in perfect harmony with each other, but in addition, it immediately stands out to the viewer how wonderfully all the participants of the supper relate and contrast with each other. The figures on either side of the teacher should be considered as triads, fused, according to the artist's plan, into a single whole, but at the same time, each figure is individual and connected with the other two. Meanwhile, the groups are combined with neighboring groups. Such distribution of characters allows the viewer to simultaneously see individual reactions and the collective experience of the moment. Next to Christ on the right side sit John, Judas, and Peter. Peter, the most extreme in this group, flares up, as is typical of his character, and jumps up behind Judas, who in fright raises his head and, leaning forward, bends over the table. In his right hand, he tightly grips a purse, while with his left, he involuntarily makes a convulsive movement, as if saying, "What does this mean? What will happen to us?" Meanwhile, Peter wraps his left arm around the right shoulder of John, who is leaning against him, and points to Christ. He demands that the beloved disciple ask the teacher, who is the traitor. Grasping the handle of a knife with his right hand, Peter accidentally strikes Judas in the side, justifying the frightened gesture of Judas as he abruptly leans forward and overturns the salt shaker. This group was evidently conceived before others and is the most complete in the entire painting. While on the right of the Lord, the threat of vengeance is expressed with sparse gestures. On the left, betrayal evokes vivid disgust and indignation. Apostle James, the elder, leans back in fear, extends his hands forward, and with his head bowed, keeps his eyes fixed on a single point, like a person who, upon hearing monstrous news, already sees it vividly. Thomas peers over his shoulder and, moving towards the Savior, places the index finger of his right hand on his forehead. Philip, the third in this group, completes it beautifully. He stands and, leaning towards the teacher, presses his hand to his chest, clearly saying, "Lord, is it I? You know it. You know how pure my heart is. Not I, Lord." Finally, the three in the last group on this side provide us with new material for observation. They discuss among themselves the monstrous news they have just heard. Matthew sharply turns his head to the left, towards his two companions, yet his hands reach towards the teacher, and with this remarkable movement, he connects his group with the preceding one. Thaddeus shows the strongest surprise, doubt, and suspicion. He lowers his left hand to the table and raises his right, as if preparing to strike the back of his left palm. Such a movement is noticeable only among simple people who, when caught off guard, try to say, "Didn't I say this? Didn't I always suspect?" Simon sits with great dignity at the end of the table, and therefore we see his entire figure. As the oldest of all, he wears rich, flowing robes, and his face and movements indicate that he is surprised and contemplative, but not at all shattered and hardly even agitated. And if we now immediately shift our gaze to the opposite end of the table, we will see Bartholomew there, who has crossed his left leg over his right, and leaning his entire body forward, rests on his hands, which lie calmly on the table. He listens, probably trying to hear what John asked of the Lord. For, evidently, it is precisely this that all those sitting on this side encourage the beloved disciple to inquire. James the Lesser, sitting next to Bartholomew, leans back, placing his left hand on Peter's shoulder, just as Peter places his hand on John's shoulder. But James does it gently, seeking only an explanation, whereas Peter threatens with retribution. And just as Peter stands behind Judas, so too does James the Lesser peer from behind Andrew, one of the most significant figures, who raises his hands, extends them forward, and, with palms open, shows them to everyone with an expression of clear horror. These contrasting reactions emphasize the drama of the scene and the diversity of human emotions arising in response to betrayal. Thus, Leonardo uses composition and gestures to convey not only individual reactions, but also complex interpersonal relationships, creating a vivid and dynamic scene that remains one of the most significant in the history of art. In the next episode, we will examine other aspects of Leonardo's Last Supper in detail. Subscribe to the channel, ask questions, leave comments, and like if you enjoyed this video. Until next time, yours, Art Pastor.